Hi, this is Ms. DB, and in this video I'm going to go over how to do some of the problems from the Chapter 5, Section 4 assignment on completing the square. So the first ones, actually you don't really have to do completing the square. It's like a easier way. If you don't have an x term, if you only have an x squared and a number, then basically all you're going to be doing is getting the number on one side and the x squared on the other side, and then taking the square root to solve it. So these ones are going to be easier to do than the rest of the worksheet. Let me get my pen here. So for number, I don't know, let's say number 3, you would add 4 to both, whoops, I moved it, add 4 to both sides, and you'd get 6x squared equals 38 plus 4 is 42, and then you divide both sides by 6, and you'd get x squared equals 7. And then all you'd have to do to finish this would be to take the square root of both sides, and you'd actually get plus or minus. There's two answers. X is plus 7 or x is minus 7. If you're typing it out, instead of using a pen or pencil, you can write square root of 7, and then you can put a comma or a semicolon and write negative square root of 7, instead of writing plus or minus the square root of 7 with the symbol. Number 4, there is an x term, but let's see if we can factor in number 4. Whoops. If we put an x here and an x here, and let's see, this could be a minus 1 and a minus 1 here, then I would have, let me just FOIL that back together, make sure it works. X times x should be x squared. Outer would be minus 1x, inner would be minus 1x, so I'd get the negative 2x like I'm supposed to, and then negative 1 times negative 1. So instead of writing it as x minus 1 times x minus 1, I could write this as x minus 1. I keep pushing a little tiny button on my pen. I could write this as x minus 1 squared equals 10, and then you can take the square root of both sides, and the square root of a square is just going to be x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 10. And then you're not done because we want to solve for x, so you still have to add 1 to both sides. When you do that, you're just going to write your answer as x equals 1, put the 1 first, plus or minus, and then the square root of 10. Or there's really two answers, 1 plus the square root of 10, 1 minus the square root of 10. Alright, now let's move on to completing the square. When you complete the square, you figure out there will be an x term, and you take half of the number in front of the x, and you square that number. So here's an example. If you had x squared plus 6x and you wanted to complete the square, you'd take half of 6, which is 3, and you'd square that and you'd get 9. Why do we do this? We do it so that we can factor so that it'll look like the one we just did. See, the one we just did was able to be factored, and then we could simplify it easier. That's why we're doing this, so that it'll look like the one we just did. Okay, so we're going to take half of the middle term and square it, and then add it, and then write it as then factor it. So number 5 and 6 are started. Let's look at number 8. So we're going to take half of 3, which you could write as 1.5, but I'm going to leave it as a fraction, and then we're going to square that, and then you're going to add that number. So x squared plus 3x plus, well, 3 squared is 9, 2 squared is 4. So that's what I'm going to add to both sides. Now the last step is to factor this. It's going to be x. See, now I could write it like this, but what's going to go inside here is going to be this number right here. Before I squared it is going to go here and here. 3 halves, 3 halves. Well, because both of these parentheses have the exact same thing in it, I could write x plus 3 halves squared. That's what the last step is, to factor it so that it's something squared. Alright, now we're going to carry that one step farther, and we're going to do that, but this time we're going to add it to both sides of the equal sign. So I didn't realize I had opened up the one. This is the one I tried making this video before, but my sound didn't work. So some of my work is already on here, but I'm going to start over. So on these problems, there's an equal sign. The ones we just did, there was no equal sign. So we're going to do the same thing, except we have to set it up correctly. So pen. So in order to set it up correctly, we want the d squared, or the variable squared, on one side, and the other one, the other variable. So I had to subtract 10d from both sides. I'm going to leave a space. I want the 8 over here. Now I also, as I'm looking at this, I could have divided everything by 2 to start with. That would have made this be an easier problem. And if I do that, I would get d squared minus 5d, I'm going to keep my space there, equals 4. Now is when I'm going to do the step we just learned. I'm going to take the b term, the one in front of the variable, negative 5, and I'm going to take half of it. And then I'm going to square that. Negative 5 squared is 25. Leave it as a fraction. 2 squared is 4. So now I have to add that, 25 fourths, that's why I left this gap here, to both sides. Both sides has to have that added. Okay, now remember the reason we did that is so that we can now factor this side over here. It's going to be something squared. Well, we know it's d because d times d is d squared. Remember what goes in here? It's this before we squared it. It's a minus because it was minus negative 5/2. So I put d minus 5/2 squared, and now that's going to be equal to, and now over here I need to simplify this. All right, so 4 is the same as 16 fourths. I could take 4 over 1 and multiply top and bottom by 4 to get a common denominator. 16 fourths plus 25 fourths is 41. Okay. Now the next step, let me erase some more stuff here, is to take the square root of both sides. And I'm almost to where I'm not going to erase everything because it looks like that's going to be my answer over there. Let's see how we got to there. So the next step is to take the square root of this side and the square root of this side. When I take the square root of something that's been squared, I just get d minus 5/2 equals plus or minus the square root of 41 fourths, but the square root of 4 is 2. And then you'll see that this is the next step. So I had that. Then I will add 5/2 to both sides so that I get d by itself. And when I do that, this is my final answer here. I'd have 5 plus or minus square root of 41 all over 2 because both of these had a denominator of 2. And that's how you would do completing the square. Let me just start one more. Let's look at number 11 just a little bit. First of all, I'm going to see if there's something I can divide everything by. I'm going to divide by a negative 3 to make my life a little easier. You want to have a positive x squared term. So that would leave me with x squared minus 6x, because 18 divided by negative 3 is negative 6. Leave a gap, equals negative 30 divided by negative 3 is 10. And then your next step is to take half the term in front of the x, take half of that. That'd be negative 3. And then square that. That number is what you add to both sides. Okay? Now, because you did that, you're now going to be able to write this as something squared. Because now it is set up to be the sum of two squares here. So we'd have x minus 3, and remember this is the hint, that's what goes in there, squared, x minus 3 parentheses squared is equal to 19. And then you take the square root of both sides, and then you'll add the 3 to both sides, and you'll get an answer like 3 plus or minus the square root of something. Alright, so I hope that helps. On the very last part, all you have to do on this one is you're going to rewrite that in vertex form, and then say what the vertex is. So you start out the same way. There's one tricky part of this. Let me look at 15 first. If I say, oh, I could divide everything by 3 here, which you can, but you can't divide f of x by 3. We're not getting rid of the 3. Instead, we're factoring out a 3. So when it's equal sign on both sides and you can divide every number by 3, there won't be the 3. But when it's just something equal to 3x squared minus 6x minus 15, there still is a 3. So I'm going to factor the 3 out, which would leave me with minus 2x minus 5, right? Now I still want to complete the square so that I can write this in vertex form. The 3 doesn't go away. So I'm just going to move this over a little bit. And there's the minus 5 at the end. Now, if you want to add something inside of here, you can do that as long as you also subtract it. Does that make sense? You can't just add a number to another number without changing it. So I can take half of that and get -1 and square it and get 1, and I can add 1 to both sides. But then I also have to subtract 1. Okay, so now I can write this as 3 parentheses x minus 1 squared. There's 2 sets of parentheses here. Minus 5 minus 1 is minus 6. This isn't quite vertex form yet because of the 3. So in order to get it in vertex form, let's get rid of some of this other stuff. Let's see. I'm going to distribute this through. That would be 3 times x minus 1 squared minus 18. 3 times this and then 3 times this. Now it's in vertex form. And now you can say what the vertex is by looking at the example. All right, I hope that helps. Sorry about the other video that had no sound. This should be good now. Thank you very much.